I mean, we're here at the conference for conservation of biodiversity, and biodiversity naturally means all life in nature, which is animals and their habitats, us included. And I think that makes it clear climate change, of course, hammers almost everywhere in the world, increasingly now with changing weather, with changing sea levels, etc., etc., and of course changing also our conditions in which animals are living in their natural habitats. We see at the moment that increasing droughts, increasing floods, increasing climate catastrophes, which are hitting hard on humans, but they of course also hit hard on endangered species, on all animals and their habitats, like forests, for example, are being damaged by climate change at the moment, and we don't know how that is all going to shape up in the next 20, 50, 100 years. This may be very different from, for example, migration routes of elephants migrating from one forest to the other in different parts of the year. That those migration routes may just disappear because there is no grassland whatsoever anymore in that area for them to roam. And with them, of course, with the elephants and with that grassland or with the forest that disappears, the whole of biodiversity may disappear or shape in a way which is hurting very much the livelihoods of humans, which may change as well the living ability of humans in that area, and of course at the end as well the animals. That's why the animals in the center, they should be looked at as being in the focus when we debate what is necessary to mitigate the climate change impacts. And also they should be in the focus when we talk about prevention of the scale of climate change, because they are a very good indicator for what actually the damage will be.
I mean, there's been a lot of talk, it seems, in the last couple of days here about protected areas, protected marine areas. I'm not sure if there's been talk about protected areas on land, but should the impacts of climate change occur, and that there are plenty of sort of different projections, is there a situation where, I don't know, a huge elephant reserve will suddenly become denuded of all crops, anything they can eat, and then they have to go somewhere? And if their reserve isn't capable of looking after them, are there currently any plans? Is there any discussions about where those elephants could go?
Oh yes, we are working together with researchers, for example, in Southern Africa or in East Africa, looking into this, how things have changed and what may be the potential differences between now and later. We are also very concerned working with local communities to mitigate the conflicts between the big wildlife like elephants and them with their fields, with their crops, with their kids, and how to kind of like have a most harmonized, peaceful coexistence. And we're helping in many ways that this works very well. But now with the climate change that comes in, we don't know yet, because the pressure on the animals and on the humans are increasing, and the meeting points, kind of like you mentioned, the one field, that those may be the new conflict field, so to speak, and we have to find solutions for that. Together with the people who are living there and together with the animals, so to speak, we need to see also what are they actually trying at the moment in terms of the changes they run through.
There's been a debate, it seems, in the Indian media recently about tiger enclosures and whether or not you should allow tourists to actually visit the enclosures. Is there a case that actually sometimes these animals need human contact, because otherwise, if no one's interested at all, they'll forget why they're interesting and bulldoze their lands where they live?
Yeah, I think the tiger, of course, is in a very special situation because it's highly threatened. We've got the fortune here in India that more than 50% of the remaining tigers, once 100,000 roaming Asia, now maybe 3,000 only left. And more than half, or about half, is in India. A great kind of like treasure, and at the same time a great responsibility. So the tigers are in a very special situation because they are so highly threatened. Other animals, generally speaking, yes, tourism, contact, kind of like by seeing them, that is something that can also increase the value, increase the respect, increase the appreciation from people on the one hand. It can also help with the infrastructure and some businesses, etc., if it's done ecologically sound, if it's done in a real ecologically sustainable manner and in a socially sustainable manner. And I think that is more the aspect of it that needs to be checked. On highly endangered species, the bigger they are, the more place they need, the more kind of like undisturbance they need. it may be considerable to have a core area which is closed, but that doesn't mean that tourists doesn't necessarily can go there at all. But in cases of big crisis, of course, you sometimes have to take measures which may otherwise not be appropriate to consider. And I think it's a case-by-case decision that needs to be taken in those cases with all the stakeholders involved.
Are there any politicians in the world that you could point out who are particularly active on animal rights? Because it's not going to win you any votes, is it?
Well, animal welfare, I think, is particularly present in a country like India and in the government, with some politicians. It's particularly present in a country like Kenya and East Africa, but they are very rare in terms of animal welfare. I think wildlife conservation is a very present and common shared value and also political goal, but then the scale of conservation is a matter. And I think from our point of view, with all our experience in the field, and in experience with also the consumer behavior for wildlife products as much as in terms of the behavior of the animals and wildlife-human conflicts or wildlife-human positive coexistence examples, without animal welfare included in the mind of politicians and at the end in the political policies and legislation, we will not really get anywhere in terms of saving biodiversity, because then the respect lacks to actually treat animals appropriately and come down with the right solutions. If you don't care about the individual animal, you don't really care about the biodiversity with its dynamic and its unbelievable, fascinating dynamics between the animals, the forest and the humans, and the unbelievable scale of foundation that this delivers for our own livelihoods. We're going to lose that if the respect lacks. So only a few governments really have adopted better animal welfare standards. The European Union has in the past now put it into its constitution, and we've got a lot of hope that this will be also kind of like a good example in the future for other governments to take animal welfare in. And at the conference here, when we talk about utilization of wildlife, I think the animal welfare aspect is one thing that is missing so far. Slowly, government officials are hearing it. Some are starting to adopt it and even seeing the necessity, and that's why we are here. We're trying to bring it into the conference and into the decisions.
I remember reading about an island called Guam, which I think is in the Pacific, and they have a infestation of spiders and snakes because the snakes were introduced and they killed all the birds that ate the spiders. And nothing kills the snakes, so now it has more snakes and spiders per square metre than anywhere else on the planet. I mean, I've seen pictures, they're in grist, it looks absolutely horrendous. And I guess my point is there enough, if you forget about conferences like this for a second, is there enough communication to people in the street to explain how ecosystems work and why, perhaps, my girlfriend shouldn't kill all the spiders in the bathroom, and why we should take more care of the whole chain, because unless there's that understanding, no one's going to care.
The short answer is no, there's not yet enough understanding. I think also that, and we appreciate that very much, it has been recognized, the lack of education, the lack of joint exchange with all the people in their different areas, and also the consideration, what can I do at home? Why does my action here, my purchase, for example, of a wildlife product like ivory, actually, which in India is prohibited, but in other countries you can as a tourist buy that, why does that actually impact the whole of Central Africa biodiversity? Because the elephants are poached and killed in such numbers that they disappear. Tree species can't grow anymore if the elephants are not there, because they have to actually have the seeds run through their digesting systems, and then it needs to be spread, etc., etc. So this kind of like, yes, it needs to be brought to schools. We have a big program for that as well. We work also here in India with the government, but also in other countries like in China and in Europe with governments on that. And I think the initiative to really kind of like bring this mainstream, the biodiversity, as it is said, into schools, into families, into cities, into also the political debate, of course, that is extremely important.
But is there enough in, you talk about Europe and people think, well, education is better in Europe than anywhere else. I wasn't taught about how the ecosystems are all related, and is it not up to organisations like yours and others to actually focus on that and to actually drill it home, use shock tactics, be it on social media or adverts or anything else? Do you not have a responsibility to, focus too on Europe, which is perceived as being this kind of cradle of knowledge?
Absolutely, and we do as much as we can. We also produce actually curriculums and lectures and things for teachers, so that they don't have to produce them themselves, so that it's easy for them to take it into the classroom. We suggest every year one action week for animals in schools and universities on a specific item on wildlife, and of course they should also be wildlife issues from their home, so that it's kind of like people then, be it children, be it adults, going out of the house, they remember that and can actually put it into action as well. Let me take you to, if I may, give you one example where also poverty a lot of times, of course, is a problem, because if people are very poor, they need first of all to survive and they have to feed their families. In Kashmir, there was a big village of 50,000 people altogether, actually building their livelihoods on producing probably the world's most finest shawls in the world, the Chattu shawls, very highly priced. But the wool came from the Tibetan antelope. Tibetan antelopes are living 3,000–4,000 meters high in the mountains in Tibet and into China, and they have been poached. And only you need several animals to produce one big shawl. So they kind of like went down from the millions down to only 60,000 animals left under very harsh conditions. Now, the question was what to do. You got the poor people there, you got the poor animals there, and the alternative was with those 50,000 people to develop a solution. The solution was to use a wool from the Kashmir goat. And they now produce probably still almost the world's finest shawls in the world, with, as I have one example here, with the trademark of...
You didn't need to bring us gifts.
It's probably a gift from the local people. But this is cashmere wool, but it's called pashmina because it is from that region, it's from those people, it comes local, it should have that also, and it's a quality trademark now. And the Tibetan antelope gets much less poached. That together with anti-poaching unit, I think has a success that the animal has a chance to recover now.
Final question, because we've overrun loads and my head producer is getting very angry with me, but I have one final question, and it's that 2050, the world's population is predicted to be, God knows what, 9 billion. And that's probably a sign that that's bad news. Wildlife is finished if it gets to 9 billion, isn't it? What hope do you have, briefly?
I don't know. I mean, at the moment, it is clear that many people are starving, but the world has enough space and nature can supply enough to supply those people. I think it would be good if we are not ending up with 9 billion people, but the main point is with how much respect do we decide how we act and how we impact nature, and how much of nature we respect as our own livelihood in the future, and the animals in the center will help us to actually understand that.